everybody. Welcome back to the Pace Bene channel. I am so happy to have today's guest here today, Christina Leaño. Christina is a spiritual director, mindfulness and meditation teacher, and environmental activist. She is the associate director of the Global Catholic Climate Movement, working to connect church teaching and environmental activism. Christina, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Rosie. It's such a delight to be here with you.
Thank you. It's an honor for me. Christina, a lot of what we talk about at Pace Bene is how everything is connected, war, racism, environmental destruction, it's all connected. And those are all, of course, negative things. But things can also be connected for the good. And so I was wondering, how do you see nonviolence and caring for the environment as being connected?
Thank you, Rosie. I mean, I feel like you just already quoted from Laudato Si, the Pope's encyclical on care for our common home, where one of my favorite lines from there is everything is connected. Kind of this recognition of how social, environmental issues, peace and justice, the internal and the external, all of it is interwoven into this web of life given by our Creator. So there's so many ways to unpack this, but in terms of I like how you frame how can we see this as a positive thing? And I think it's in the encyclical, particularly in the beginning, is that the name itself, Laudato Si, comes from Saint Francis, who we know as so much of a peacemaker. Laudato Si comes from the Saint Francis's Canticle of the Creatures, praise be you, my God. And so the invitation so much of this encyclical is to remember how connected we are with creation. It's a return to God as creator and a God of creation, and allow those relationships then to kind of be expressed by our words, our actions, and our thoughts. And so reconnecting with creation is such a life-giving thing. I think that so many of us can look at our childhood and think of stories where we felt so connected in creation. And in the encyclical Laudato Si, Pope Francis talks about how important it is for us to kind of go back and remember those times that we felt connected with creation, because it can remind us not only of the gift of creation from God, but it can also remind us of ourselves and who we are at our very kind of center of being interwoven with all of creation. Because if we can remember that we're connected, that we're in communion, that we're actually brothers and sisters with all of creation, then it can shift how then we treat our brothers and sisters. And it's kind of going back to that relationship of remembering that everything is connected that can help then help us cultivate an environmental ethic, can help us develop an ethic of peace. Because if we feel connected to somebody, if we see somebody or a creature as our brother and sister, we're not going to treat them as objects. We're not going to want to harm them. We're going to treat them as if we're connected. And so kind of, I feel like when we talk about what the relationship between peace and environmentalism, the roots are really much the same. It's about kind of cultivating our connection with each other and with all of creation and living out of that relationship.
Oh, thank you. And what a wonderful answer. Thank you so much. I also loved reading about your work with the Global Climate Catholic Movement. I said that wrong.
Everybody does.
Sorry. Global Catholic Climate Movement. I'm so sorry. Can you tell our viewers a bit more about that and how you got connected with that?
Sure. So the Global Catholic Climate Movement is an international movement of hundreds of Catholic organizations and individuals helping the church bring Laudato Si to life. So helping the church to live out this integral ecology that Pope Francis talks about in the encyclical. And we do this in several different ways. We invite people into an ecological conversion, or this kind of a change of heart that is both practical and spiritual, to kind of to transform their relationship with creation so as to care for creation. So we encourage people to pray with creation. We encourage people to cultivate that communion with creation, just like St. Francis did, and just to kind of have that internal process around their relationship with God and Creator. So it's a very kind of spiritual internal movement that we encourage. And then we also encourage transformation around lifestyles, kind of encouraging people to like look at their own footprint and ways that how are they harming the earth, and what are ways that we can actually heal the planet, both as individuals by looking at our own individual practices around food or energy, but also as institutions. So like right now we're working with the Vatican on a Laudato Si Action platform that can help institutions to drive down their emissions and help them to live Laudato Si as an institution. And then the third area of our work is around advocacy, of helping the church raise a prophetic voice around the climate crisis and ecological issues. So we've been very active around divestment, encouraging institutions to divest their investments from fossil fuels. And so we've helped to engage, tens of Catholic institutions, universities, healthcare systems, dioceses, religious congregations to divest from fossil fuels as a way to kind of really kind of yank the moral agency of the fossil fuel industry to even operate, and to really encourage and raise this urgent cry to transition away from fossil fuels. So as I was thinking about this interview, I was thinking of like how much of this process of both we work both like internally, the ecological conversion, to externally, like the lifestyle and public advocacy is so much resonates with my experience of nonviolence and Pace Bene, and what attracted me originally to kind of the work of nonviolence, that kind of saw both the internal and the external work as like two sides of the same coin, and that our work has to be holistic. Transformation has to kind of, it's not one or the other, but it's both, it has to be both kind of an internal and an external movement. And so I think that's what's, I would say even within our staff and our movement, we're trying to kind of encourage both these internal and external movements, without putting one as more important than the other. And so like as a movement, we take time to slow down and to pray, so we have these like monthly prayer services where we bring our global community online together with a different region sponsoring and helping us to kind of hear the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor, through a time of reflection and prayer. So just last Friday, it was sponsored by Asia Pacific. So we heard voices from the Philippines and from India and from Indonesia, and it helped us to kind of live the encyclical of hearing the cry of the earth or the cry of the poor, so that we can actually like be in connection with, that to actually see what's going on. But then we also try to move like really fast, because, we have so little time to really shift things. And so, we're responsive in terms of like this advocacy work, and really trying to lift up the moral cry of needing to address the climate crisis by supporting like the climate strikes or other advocacy initiatives that the climate movement might be engaged in.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. And I thank you for all of your work with them. When you say, we have so little time, it's so true. And I remember it was my first interview with Pace Bene with Rev Yearwood, and he wore a hat that said 10 years because, 10 years and then we're kind of at the point of no return. And so I thank you so much for all of your work for the environment and for showing us that it's all connected and we can each do something. Yeah. And my last question is, what does nonviolence mean to you?
Hmm. So I like to go back to the kind of the biblical, the word for peace, in scripture of, my goodness, I'm totally blanking, but that means right relationship. That true peace is about kind of right relationship. And for me, that's what kind of nonviolence is about, of being in right relationship, like with myself. And so that has to do with kind of self-awareness, self-care, self-love. I do a lot of work around like self-compassion, because in so many ways we are at war with ourselves, particularly those of us in the, I feel like here in the United States, like we can be so hard on ourselves, and that kind of the violence against ourselves and then manifests against other people, through our shadow, or just in the ways that we're unhappy perhaps with ourselves, it comes out. And so that internal work is so important. So being in right relationship with ourselves, and then being in right relationship with our brother and sister and with all of creation, is, to be constantly cultivating those relationships of love. And I love that quote. I think it's from Dorothy Day, who says, like, I love God as much as the person that I love the least. And it's always such a reminder of like, you think you love God, and then you have to be like, oh, do I really love God because of how I'm harboring, some kind of grudge against somebody? And so being in right relationship with others, particularly those that are challenging, is part of the work of nonviolence. And the tool that helps me, one of the best tools that I took away from my time at Pace Bene was the whole 2 hands of nonviolence. Of like, yeah, it helps me to move beyond my whole like dualistic thinking of like being like, okay, like if somebody says something or somebody's done something to harm me, I can say like, no, but like, you know what, you're always going to be like my brother or sister. And like, this has been such an incredible tool for me to cultivate nonviolence, of always remembering that I'm called to be in relationship. And then the other piece, of course, around nonviolence is to address the structural issues, so the advocacy and looking at kind of how we're not in right relationship as like a community, both locally and globally, and having to address that.
Oh, thank you so much, Christina. I'm so grateful for you and thankful that you were able to be here today. Thank you again.
Thank you, Rosie. It's such a delight to be with you. I'm so glad to kind of reconnect with Pace Bene, and yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much.